Hello out there, my name is Christina. Welcome or welcome back. Usually I would say that we're here to gush about the films that we love and try understanding the ones that we don't. However, we're going to do something a little different this time around. But first, context. A few years ago, I received a scratch-off poster for a 100 movies bucket list, and I'm really grateful to this list because it not only exposed me to movies that were made outside of the area that I live in, but it also increased my appreciation for the film production process overall. I populated a list of posters that correspond with all of these movies. I cut them out, and I put them in this brown paper bag. My intentions are to take the posters out randomly one by one, and then just give a short spiel regarding either my experience of that movie or my opinions about it. Some of what I have to say will be short and snippy. Other times I might get a little long-winded. I might start talking about movies that aren't necessarily on this list. I might just share some personal information about myself. Either way, my hope is to encourage my viewers to branch out and maybe take a chance on a movie they otherwise would not have discovered on their own. And I know either way I will have a good time. So, without further ado, thank you for being here, and here's 100 movies for you. 12 Angry Men, 1957. Great first pick. Definitely a masterclass in dialogue. It's one of those one-room wonders where everything happens in one place. I can't speak enough about Henry Fonda's presence. It's both commanding and compassionate at the same time. And there's a moment where he pulls something out of his pocket. I won't spoil it, but it never fails to be sort of a Jerry Springer moment for me. So that is one of my favorite movies for sure. Blade Runner, 1982. I think its implications as far as how much something either looks or feels like a human and how you treat it is much more important than it gets credit for. I have read the book this is based off of. Great cinematography, great costuming, and of course, I do like Harrison Ford, so can't go wrong with that. And I do like the new one, so. Four Weddings and a Funeral, 1994, has a Elton John song in it that I absolutely adore, and Hugh Grant has the charm turned up to 11. Definitely one of those movies where I think, as far as the characters are concerned, the moments the viewers aren't privy to are the most important, so just keep that in mind. Lord of the Rings, 2001. That's the first one. But for the purposes of this list, I did watch all of the movies in a series, if that did apply. And I had already read the books before seeing all of these, which is why I think this story is as funny as it could be. I went to go see the third one, so Return of the King, for my birthday when I was, I think, 11 or 12. And I ended up crying myself to sleep that night because I was so upset that Frodo got his finger bitten off. Yeah. Lagan, Once Upon a Time in India, 2001. They speak both Hindi and English in this film. It is set in the late 1800s. It's about a group of individuals that learn to play cricket in order to relieve themselves from some really ridiculous taxes. Sort of deviates from the usual sports film formula in that there's a lot of music, but the music is really good. Forrest Gump, 1994. I've watched this movie probably a million times. Likeable protagonist. I also really like Sally Field. Rosemary's Baby, 1968. I am absolutely terrified of pregnancy, and I don't like holding babies. I feel like every time I do, I'm going to drop them. Not on purpose, obviously. But What's really sad about this movie, I just made this connection recently, just because the influence of cult members in the film is as important as it is. It's really sad to think that Roman Polanski's wife, Sharon Tate, was murdered by cult members a little over a year after this movie was released, which it would be sad anyway, but I've always been curious to know if that's just like a wild coincidence or what. Dirty Dancing, 1987. I went to go see this movie in theaters for the 30th anniversary, and when Patrick Swayze delivered the "Nobody Puts Baby in the Corner" line,
Nobody puts baby in a corner.
the entire theater just freaked out. So, core memory, I really like that movie, so. The Untouchables, 2011. This is a French movie. There is a remake that came out recently with Bryan Cranston and Kevin Hart. That said, cannot beat the original. The relationship that develops between the two main characters is, I guess you could say, expected. I mean, it alludes to it developing, but the way it develops is seemingly organic and just very heartwarming. No Country for Old Men, 2007. I have read the book this movie is based off of. I think the author is Cormac McCarthy. Movie's a bit slow for me, probably intentionally. That said, for being a bowl cut with legs, Javier Bardem does give a really good performance that I can't add much praise to. American Psycho, 2000. Definitely Bale's most focused performance, if nothing else. However, I do feel really bad for Jared Leto because he's just always getting the stuffing beat out of him by people that are just exponentially better looking than him. I think it is based off a book. I can't remember if there's a sequel. Psycho, 1960. Alfred Hitchcock. The one thing I do like about Hitchcock as a director, he has a really good sense of what an audience member needs to see versus what they need to hear. And Psycho, I think, is maybe one of the better representations of that gift that he has, other than maybe Rear Window. Drive, 2011. The director is Nicholas, I want to say Refn. I don't know how to pronounce his name, but his movies always have really good cinematography. I know the director is both dyslexic and colorblind. I do kind of love how he maybe uses that to his advantage. That said, Gosling's performance is always praised because of how little dialogue there is. But if you like Drive, there's another movie called Valhalla Rising that stars Mads Mikkelsen that's kind of in that same neighborhood of good cinematography and sort of reserved performances. I enjoy it. I think it's a very pretty movie. Airplane, 1980. This is a very, very, very stupid movie, but I do appreciate the humor, and Surely You Can't Be Serious is sort of a litmus test for me at this point. No comment. The Evil Dead, 1981. I'm not really big on horror movies anyway, and I'm also especially not good with zombies, undead. I just kind of find them a little boring. That said, the protagonist is really cool, so I can't complain. And I have a friend that does a really good Ash or Asher cosplay. You'll have to forgive me, I don't remember the main guy's name. Boo on me, I guess. The Usual Suspects, 1995. I try to stay away from using words like overrated, but this is definitely one of the more maybe underwhelming movies I've ever watched. And it's almost impossible to go into this movie blind, so that might be part of the issue. But I watched it once and I was fine. I was spent. Boys in the Hood, 1991. One cool thing about this movie is the person that directed and wrote it, he was filling out, it was either a college application or it was an essay of some kind, but the prompt was give us an idea for a movie, and Boys in the Hood being partially autobiographical was what transpired from him filling out that assignment. So you never know where the inspiration for a critically acclaimed movie is going to come from, to say the very least. A Space Odyssey, 1968. The conflict of man versus machine is pretty archaic in its own right. That said, I admire how boldly A Space Odyssey handles that sort of conflict. At the same time, I don't know. I don't have any really, deep thoughts related to that, other than the fact that it's obvious why that movie does stand the test of time as much as it does. The Big Lebowski, 1998. The dude abides, but I don't. It's not for me. Just not my thing. I don't get it. I don't understand the grander appeal of that movie. Mean Girls, 2004. Definitely one of the more quotable movies on this list. I've seen this more times than I can count. It's just sort of a good laid-back movie, I think. Sort of dramatizes the high school experience that I did not have, I should say. I was the opposite of a mean girl in high school. I'm sure that's hard for everyone to believe. Fight Club, 1999. This is based off a book written by Chuck Palahniuk. I definitely recommend that book. The movie, as you can guess, leaves out a lot of key elements that further elaborate on the dynamic between the main characters. That said, Brad Pitt and Edward Norton are a match made in heaven. And again, Jared Leto is just always getting the stuffing beaten out of him by people that are exponentially better looking than him. The Deer Hunter, 1978. This movie is dreadfully long. You could easily take out about 40 to 45 minutes of the film out and still understand what's going on. That said, one of my favorite Christopher Walken performances, and the last moment of eye contact between the characters of Mike and Nick just breaks my heart. Amélie. This is a French movie. I adore the protagonist of this movie. She's whimsical, really likes fostering a sense of community, is kind of obsessed with solving other people's problems. But there's also, I guess, a loneliness about her that resonates with me. And I don't know. Gangs of New York, 2002. Easily my least favorite Scorsese film. I'm just not crazy about the accents, and maybe if I understood the context of the story a little more, I might enjoy it. But otherwise, no. Office Space, 1999. I can't really remember much from this movie other than the Jell-O with the stapler inside of it. I hope I'm thinking of the right thing, but I'm pretty sure that's what that is from. Bahubali, The Beginning, 2015. This is a Tamil and Telugu film. This is a series. I can't remember if there's 2 or 3. But they have these absolutely crazy fight scenes. Like, there's this one where they're sending via catapult. They're like cannonballs, but they're made of people. They're literally people in these, formations that look like cannonballs. And there's one scene where it lands on the ground, and the way the people... I mean, it's It's a crazy movie. I don't even remember what is going on plot-wise. Choreography is spot on, though. Ghostbusters, 1984. I mean, one of the coolest theme songs out there, obviously. And my childhood home, people used to think it was haunted, so not to say that's why I enjoyed Ghostbusters, but I find it quite entertaining for that reason. City of God, 2002. This is a Portuguese movie, devastatingly nuanced. I am really bad at summarizing movies, but there's two sort of primary characters, and one of them is an aspiring photographer, and the other is a high-ranking drug dealer. That's a bit reductionist, but anyway, they're different careers, if you will, feed into one another in ways that are pretty surprising. But the thing about that movie to appreciate, it's set in Rio de Janeiro in the 1970s, and they don't exaggerate the condition of the area to either make a point or feed its plot. There is one part where a child is injured, and beforehand they are asked how they prefer to be injured. They are given a choice. And that scene just haunts me. It's Jurassic Park, 1993. My standards when it comes to movies that have dinosaurs in them at all are just in the ground. This is my favorite series. No one can talk me out of it. The Dilophosaurus is my favorite dinosaur. 7, 1995. Kevin Spacey's character is the perfect combination of mystery and audaciousness. The scene where he reveals himself, I've watched that probably so many times, it's unhealthy. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, 1966. Western, as far as genre, tends to be a bit of a blind spot for me. When I still haven't seen the other movies that are sort of part of this unofficial trilogy. That said, Clint Eastwood, total smoke show. The theme song is great. If I try to emulate it, I will bring shame upon myself and everyone that I know. Breakfast at Tiffany's, 1961. The last person I watched this movie with tried to ruin it for me, and they failed. So to, I don't know, kind of set the scene for you, there is a cat in this movie that Holly mistreats. Nothing violent, mind you, but it's really important to read the action that I'm referring to as one of desperation instead of malice, because if you don't, everything this movie has to offer in terms of companionship and trying to authenticate the relationship that you have with other people, it will just get lost in that sense of contempt that you are very intentionally primed to have for the main character. And long live Audrey Hepburn. Little Miss Sunshine, 2006. I absolutely love Paul Dano. In this movie, the plot is just, it's so cute, and the dysfunction of the family is very realistic, and I just love seeing all the characters support one another in their own quirky little ways. A Clockwork Orange, 1971. If this is your favorite movie, you are a walking red flag. Now, the only praise I will give this movie is I do like how much it juxtaposes scenes that are meant to make you feel disturbed to the point of maybe wanting to get out of your seat, cover your eyes, etc., with those moments where Alex isn't able to cover his eyes, because they make you have a sense of sympathy for him that you really don't want to have. That said, I'm sorry, the dialogue is just insufferable, amongst other things. And the book is just even worse in that respect. Three Idiots, 2009. This movie sort of works as an indictment. Oh, I forgot to mention it's a Hindi film. But This film, it does work as an indictment of assessment-based systems that prioritize regurgitation of information over maybe original application of it. And the characters are all so very wholesome. And this movie also stars Amir Khan, who is a god amongst men. Casablanca, 1942. I just recently saw this movie in theaters. As far as incorporating aspects from different genres and pivoting on them, this movie, perfection. Not to mention, the story is just, it's such a good story. Shaun of the Dead, 2004. Again, there's zombies in this film. I don't know. It's okay. It's an okay movie. Leon the Professional, 1994. I can't take it away from Jean Reno, not Jay. But Jean Reno does a very good job in this movie. And the relationship between him and Natalie Portman's character, I understand it's supposed to be paternal, but it is borderline creepy, especially if you watch the director's cut. Oh my lord. Memento, 2000. I think this is Christopher Nolan's debut, if I'm remembering correctly. But this is my favorite Nolan film. It's definitely the most subdued in terms of maybe set design, but I think the story in this movie is the best, and Guy Pearce looks like he could ruin my life sufficiently. Back to the Future, 1985. Personally, I'm really too dumb to be watching any movies that have time travel as an important aspect. That said, the pair that is Michael J. Fox and Christopher Lloyd just warms my heart. Halloween, 1978. I don't know if I'd say Michael Myers is my favorite antagonist from a horror series. But, I mean, what can you say? The guy's really committed. That's all I'm going to say. That's it. He used to scare me to death when I was younger. The Great Dictator, 1940. This was written and directed by Charlie Chaplin, and I know he plays... It's definitely two roles. I don't know if he plays another. But I don't really remember much about the story, and I suspect I would probably have more appreciation for it if I knew about Chaplin's background just a little bit more. Amadeus, 1984, for obvious reasons, has very striking music. I don't really know much about the accuracy of the film by any means. This is also another one of those movies that just seems a little longer than it really is. The Truman Show, 1998. I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with Jim Carrey, if I'm just being honest with you. That said, I feel the same way about The Truman Show. When I watch it, I don't feel necessarily moved or drawn to empathize with Carrie's character very much. Maybe that says something about me. I don't know. The Rocky Horror Picture Show, 1975. Tim Curry is great. That said, Moulin Rouge is more my speed when it comes to high-energy musicals. Alright, Spirited Away, 2001. This is a Japanese film. Personally, I prefer Howl's Moving Castle. There's nothing wrong with Spirited Away. It is a good story. Great introduction to Miyazaki's filmography if you aren't already familiar. I actually want to go ahead and plug in my friend George. He gives a really good lecture regarding economic conditions that inspired Spirited Away's writing that you can actually see on screen. Gladiator, 2000. Russell Crowe and Joaquin Phoenix have an amazing amount of antagonistic energy. That said, Joaquin Phoenix literally looks like he could laser me with his eyeballs the entire time. So don't ask me what happens, because that's all I can focus on anytime I watch that movie. Raiders of the Lost Ark, 1981. I like Indiana Jones because he's a very cheeky egoist, but in a self-assured way as opposed to a mean-spirited one. This is my best friend's favorite series, if not her favorite movie. Not to mention his theme song is so good. The Green Mile, 1999. This might be my least favorite movie based off a Stephen King novel. I can't complain about the performances. They're all very well done. That said, there are some elements of the movie that I wish were a little more straightforward. I have since read the book, so I understand what is going on in the movie, but I think by itself, it's a little confusing. Her, 2014, very clever approach to the issues even human beings have communicating and connecting with one another, and definitely one of Joaquin Phoenix's more sensitive performances. The Dark Knight Rises, 2012, might be my favorite comic book, series, and that's only because I absolutely love Christian Bale. R.I.P. Heath Ledger while we're on that. The Departed, 2006. Don't be fooled. This is just a thirst watch for me whenever I put this movie on. If you're gonna watch The Departed, you might as well watch the movie that's based off of, and that is Infernal Affairs. This is Spinal Tap, 1984. I like the sentiment behind mockumentaries, but I tend to like it better as a series as opposed to a movie. Trainspotting, 1996. Anytime I want to identify this movie without saying the title, I always say, oh, the one with the baby on the ceiling. I'm not contextualizing that. Moonlight, 2016. As far as representation for marginalized individuals, this obviously does tick a few boxes. That said, this is very important and informative and insightful as a coming-of-age story that I think more people should be exposed to. And I'm only going to say this because of what happened at the Oscars the year this movie was released, but it definitely deserved Best Picture. Sorry, La La Land. The Goonies, 1985. I know a lot of people feel some sense of nostalgia attached to this movie. I am not one of those people. In fact, I've never made it through a full sitting of this movie. And by that, I mean I usually either start watching and something happens and I stop watching halfway through, or I'll start watching and halfway through and then I make it through to the end. This does a pretty good job of honoring that sort of like overreactive imagination that children tend to have. But other than that, I don't have any strong feelings or attachments to it. Enter the Dragon, 1973. This is a Cantonese and Mandarin film. The cultural impact of this film, as far as the representation of Asian actors in Hollywood, can't be overstated. That said, I want to more purposefully maybe meditate on that aura of charisma that Bruce Lee brings not only to this movie but almost all of his performances. You can definitely feel that sense of resiliency that he believed so strongly in, not just on set but in his daily life. It's sad to think that he died about 6 days before this movie was released, and never got to, see the impact of it. The Wizard of Oz, 1939. I used to have a coworker that absolutely adores this movie. I have read the books. They're short and sweet. I like to think of this as just a story of like four weirdos getting together and putting their different gifts that they have and maybe don't have together to make their world a better place. Titanic, 1997. It's funny, my coworker that really likes Wizard of Oz is also sort of a Titanic aficionado or professional, if you will. That said, obviously very iconic music. The leads, the performances are great, chemistry, whatsoever. I used to watch that movie all the time as a kid, just completely enthralled. The Godfather, 1972. I always tell people, if there's a movie and there's a bunch of characters and they're all sort of like dressed alike, I'm not going to be able to follow the action as well as I would otherwise. Now, that said, obviously, Al Pacino and Marlon Brando are fantastic in this movie, and I do like how intimate this film is in terms of like loyalty and greed and how those intersect. Groundhog Day, 1993. Now, I actually tend to like movies that have this sort of time loop iteration, even though I'm not too big on movies about time travel. Because even though there's something sort of tropey and cliche about the actual loop, there tends to be some variation in what the characters learn from being in the loop. How fast do they catch on to the fact that they're in a loop? What do they do with the scenario where there's very little consequences? I don't know. This is a good classic movie that's sort of funny in its own right. Groundhog Day, 1993. I'm just kidding. Can you imagine? Stand By Me, 1986. Yesterday was River Phoenix's birthday. Now, this is my favorite movie that's based off of a Stephen King novel, besides maybe Carrie. But the ending is just all the more tragic because of what happened to Phoenix. And I absolutely love that last line of like internal monologue that the like insight writer describes. Brokeback Mountain, 2005. What a performance put on by both Jake Gyllenhaal and Heath Ledger. I do meet a lot of people that write this movie off as like boring and not entertaining, and my response to comments like that is like, shame on you. This movie should not feel as realistic as it does, and it is just a gigantic gut punch. Rocky, 1976. I can't tell if it's obvious, but I am not a big sports movie person, much less a boxing movie person. The stair scene is iconic, but otherwise, I'm okay. I'm cool. It's a movie. Vertigo, 1958. I know a lot of people are partial and say that this is Alfred Hitchcock's best movie, but this isn't even my favorite Alfred Hitchcock movie that has James Stewart in it. No comment. It's a very green movie, like literally though. The Lion King, 1994. My younger sister has a tattoo from this movie, which basically makes it illegal for me not to like it. Not that I would. Its soundtrack is good. It's also really good on Broadway. E.T., the Extraterrestrial, 1982. I don't have any large feelings of attachment for this movie. However, that film score makes me go from feeling absolutely nothing to wanting to cry at very precise moments. Good job, John Williams. You did it. American History X, 1998. Great handling of the topic that is cyclic violence, especially when there's a generational component to be considered. There was an alternate ending that was written, it was never taped, that more aggressively undermines the process of rehabilitation that Edward Norton's character goes through. I don't think that ending isn't realistic by any means. However, if it was written with a little more ambiguity, I think I would actually prefer it to the ending that made it into the film, which is, it's a tragic, tragic ending. Up, 2009. If you really think about it, this is a road trip movie with a bunch of extra steps, right? And I like this movie's approach to the themes of like self-determination and grief and like surmounting differences you might have with another person or being. It's a cute little movie. The Silence of the Lambs, 1991. This is how you make a movie that is based off a book. Great companion to the source novel. And obviously Jodie Foster and Anthony Hopkins. They are a pair to be reckoned with. Good Will Hunting, 1997. The romantic element of this movie used to pull something sort of cynical out of me. But as I've gotten older, I've come to appreciate the supporting characters a little bit more because I think they have so many opportunities to be toxic and they aren't. They so wholeheartedly express the love that they have with one another without maybe being verbatim about it. And it's one of those movies that does a good job of balancing things that are important to both like juveniles and adults. And it really grows with viewers as opposed to separately from them. Star Wars, 1977. Empire Strikes Back is my favorite of the series. I do have a tattoo that says the Han Solo quote that goes, never tell me the odds. I won't bore you all with the story as to why I got that tattoo, except to say I do like everything that Star Wars has to say about destiny and coming into your own person, and of course being headstrong in the face of danger. The Matrix, 1999, solely responsible for my obsession with leather and sunglasses. There's much to be said about autonomy and maybe being the villain in someone else's story. I will only add that I actually really like Agent Smith. I mean, it's Hugo Weaving and he's wearing shades like 68% of the time. What am I supposed to do? Like, resist? That's not happening. Toy Story, 1995. I mean, it's a classic, and the sequels are actually pretty decent, so can't say that often. The Pianist, 2002. I am absolutely obsessed with any movie that has the Holocaust in the background. When I was in high school, I met a Holocaust survivor named Samuel Althus, and that was a life-changing experience, to say the very least. My favorite thing about The Pianist is that the tension, it's always there, but it's very quiet and it's very slow. In addition to that, the preparation that Adrian Brody put into that performance, in addition to the gravitas of it, is not something to be taken for granted. The Prestige, 2006. This used to be my favorite Nolan film, but over the years, the twist is pretty good, the twist has just kind of lost that sense of like enchantment and mystique for me. Otherwise, the performances are really good, the characters all have like really good chemistry with one another. Can't complain otherwise. Snatch, 2000. Very quotable film, but Brad Pitt has this weird accent going on that I can't it kind of pulls me out of the experience a little, not gonna lie. Scarface, 1983, cannot deny the force that is Tony Montana, though I do prefer Al Pacino in Dog Day Afternoon by a smidge. Now, tangent time, because I sustained a very embarrassing injury the last time I watched Scarface. I was making these stuffed jalapenos, and at one point, while I was eating them and watching the movie, I got some of the jalapeno in my eye. Well, I took the contact lenses out of my eyes, flushed my eyes out. It was a whole 10 or 15 minute ordeal. And then, when everything was said and done, I don't know what possessed me to do this, I took my contact lens and I put it back in my eye. I got 20-second apiece before my eye it was bad. The moral of that story is that my capacity for foolishness is boundless. Pulp Fiction, 1994, easily my least favorite Tarantino movie. I'm just not a big fan of the narrative structure, but otherwise, the diner scene is immaculate. Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb, 1964, surprisingly comical, and a lot of what it has to say about conflict, especially international conflict, still feels applicable even today. Alien, 1979. Gotta go grab something. I'm a total opportunist, but anytime I get a chance to show this off, I will. When I bought this, it was solid purple, and I hand-painted this beauty. Sort of like with Jurassic Park, if there is a creature in the movie that even slightly resembles a reptile in any way, shape, or form, I realize with Alien, that's a bit of a stretch. I'm there. I don't care. Look, it's so cool. Admire it. Sorry about that. The Shawshank Redemption, 1994. I absolutely love that quote about hope. Hope is a good thing, maybe even the best of things, and no good thing ever dies. A little bit of maybe naivety there, but I love it. Seven Samurai, 1954. This is a Japanese film. This is not my favorite Kurosawa film. That would be Rashomon. At the heart of his films is usually the subject of class disparity, Seven Samurai being no exception to that. It is just a little more incognito. Saving Private Ryan, 1998. Absolutely no disrespect to anyone that was involved in the making of this film or anyone that relates to it. But with the exception of that opening scene, I find it a little underwhelming. Lawrence of Arabia, 1962. This movie stars Peter O'Toole, who has some of the most gorgeous eyes. It is set in the desert, and the setting doesn't change very much, so it is one of those films that feels maybe a little longer than it actually is. But the story itself is quite interesting. In Bruges, 2008. I absolutely love Colin Farrell. The plot of this movie, absolutely ridiculous, but it does have its funny moments. The Grand Budapest Hotel, 2014. Excellent ensemble as to be expected of any Wes Anderson movie, and a magnificent abuse of purples and pinks. Love the set design, it is gorgeous. Reservoir Dogs, 1992. This is my favorite Tarantino movie. I can quote that whole opening diner scene almost word for word. And this introduced me to the greatness that is Tim Roth. WALL-E, 2008. I should probably say something really smart about consumerism and reducing our carbon footprint, but I'm not going to. I find this to be a cute movie. I think it reaches the audience that it intends to. It doesn't hit me as hard as it seems to other people, however. Casino Royale, 2006. This has a very good looking cast. And I cannot have an intelligent conversation about any of the James Bond movies, mostly because you're going to have to start by identifying who plays the villain. Old Boy, 2003. This is a Korean movie. Do yourself a favor. Don't even watch the most recent version that came out with Josh Brolin in it. This movie has excellent fight scenes. The twist, is pretty unpredictable. And the way everything just culminates, including the performances, is just mind-blowing. Fun fact, that show Wife Swap actually premiered about a year after this movie was released. I found that out just because of my own morbid curiosity. I would love to say those two things are not related, but trust me, I think they are. Apocalypse Now, 1979. I think given the setting of this film, this is probably one of the more self-aware movies out there, and Marlon Brando delivers an absolutely harrowing monologue towards the end. Citizen Kane, 1941. I don't feel as maybe compelled by the nuance of not only Kane's character, but the overarching plot. Not to say it's an underwhelming movie by any means. It has a good amount of intrigue, but The Notebook, 2004, great amount of chemistry between Ryan Gosling and Rachel McAdams, and one of those rare occasions where the movie is better than the book, in my opinion. The Shining, 1980, probably Jack Nicholson's best performance, not to mention Shelley Duvall's really good too. The film score of this movie is what stands out to me, but the theme of maybe alienation is maybe broadly applicable. Jaws, 1975. I can't swim, and that has no bearing on my experience with this movie. I do know that on set, the mechanical sharks they were using kept breaking down, and that informed John Williams, his experience in writing the music for it, because they needed some of the scarier parts to be parts where the shark wasn't necessarily present. I think it's very successful in that, and I congratulate, and I have to give the cast sort of kudos for surmounting that specific issue they were having. The Terminator, 1984. It's cool, ? This is sort of like, for me, it's like Fast and the Furious, but with AI. Needless to say, I don't understand those movies whatsoever. Life of Brian, 1979. I am more of a Monty Python person myself, though Life of Brian certainly has its funny moments. There's this sort of like, what good are the Romans part that I find particularly funny. Schindler's List, 1993. One of Liam Neeson's best, if not his best performance, and this movie does a good job of honoring the efforts that were made to save lives during a time where that was sort of rare. Mary and Max, 2009. Truth be told, I waited until the end to cover this movie on purpose because it is near and dear to my heart. After watching it for the first time, I became enamored with the idea of having a pen pal, and I ended up meeting one that became very special to me. We ended up having a huge falling out, and I won't comment on it. However, it was very ironically related to the amount of distance there was between us. At its core, Mary and Max is about two people navigating the world together by way of pen and paper, and it speaks to the power that words have when it comes to reaching out and meeting someone else where they're at, metaphorically or otherwise. That's it, but it's certainly not all. There's no telling how many movies have actually been made ever since we've had the ability to make them, and this industry shows no signs of slowing down and waiting for any of us to catch up. As viewers, we tend to be biased and jaded, And that's not a terrible thing. However, it does create limitations and has a consequential impact on the stories we are exposed to and how we are primed to digest them. I hope at the very least something that got mentioned today piques your interest. And if you aren't sure about how a movie is going to make you feel, maybe you'll just give it a chance. And don't worry, it's impossible to like them all, but it doesn't hurt to try. If you got this far, thank you so much for watching. As usual, questions, comments, and concerns are encouraged and welcome below. I'll see you next time, and happy film hunting. Bye.